As a schoolboy, this man used to sneak under the turnstiles to get into this ground.
Lovely! Yes! Yes! Yes!
Today, after spending £20 million, he owns it. He monitors every move his team makes from 4,000 miles away in the Caribbean.
Okay. Could I
He's Sir Jack Hayward,
name?
patriot, philanthropist, and millionaire.
It's not as nice as it was on opening day, I must say. It's got a bit churned up since.
Jack Hayward's start in life in Wolverhampton was, to say the least, fairly comfortable. His father, Charles, later Sir Charles Hayward, was as unconventional as his son. He ran away to join the circus and later became the biggest manufacturer of motorcycle sidecars in Britain. 20 years ago, he sold out his engineering interests for £26 million. This was the basis of the Hayward fortune.
Well, I was born in Dunstall Road at a house called Rosedale, which is still there. It's quite a nice house, posh, for the area, although we had a bakery. Lucy's Bakery was right opposite us, and so we grew up with the smell of lovely fresh bread all the time. I think we had 3/4 of an acre of land, which was considered not bad in those days.
Sir Jack failed to pass the entrance exam for the local grammar school in Wolverhampton. Luckily for him, his father could afford to send him to Stowe, one of the best public schools in the country.
Well, I actually got in, scraped in. I went to a prep school in Kent and sat the exam for Stowe, the common entrance, and I think the entrance, the pass then was 30%, and I think I got 30.5 and squeezed in. It's much higher now, but I scraped in and school, very happy there.
So looking back, that was probably the best thing that ever happened to you, wasn't it, in a way?
It was luck, yes, yes, fate.
It also means you don't speak with a Wolverhampton accent, eh?
No, well, I was teased when I went to prep school in Kent for saying glass and grass and one. In fact, I was known as one. One of the teachers used to say, right, who'd like to answer this question? Now, come on, one, let's hear what you say. So I got teased, but I suppose it rubbed off, the sort of southern accent rubbed off on me. But I still can talk Wolverhampton country.
Can you do a bit?
Yow from Dudley. Yow from Wolverhampton. Oh, come on, our kid. Oh, clock you on your bloody hero.
From Stowe, young Jack Hayward volunteered for the RAF.
To enlist the reserves, and every day with our fighter suites and escorted bomber raids, we are carrying the war to the enemy. We like it better that way.
He was sent to Canada and America, where he qualified as a fighter pilot. When he returned to Britain, the war in Europe was drawing to a close. But there was a shortage of glider pilots in the Far East. This job was so risky that few wanted to volunteer for it, but even then, Sir Jack's patriotism overcame his common sense.
We were in the Majestic Hotel, Harrogate, in the ballroom, and this group captain, I think he was, or maybe he was a squadron leader anyway, was a downside senior to all of us. We were just pilot officers. He told us there was a need for glider pilots, and he hinted it was the Far East, and I spoke to my chums who I'd come through flying training with, and I tried to persuade them that if they wanted to see some action, this was their only chance. And the war in Europe looks as if it's damn near over after D-Day. And so I thought I was persuasive enough to persuade them to accompany me, but when the chap, the squadron leader was, said, right, gentlemen, I think you've had long enough discuss it with your friends. So those who want to volunteer step forward in the middle of the room. And I said, right, here we go. Come on, right, let's go. And I found myself walking into the centre of the room almost alone. So I had to make a lot of new chums, but they were great fellas.
This is the Gaumont British News, presenting the truth to the free peoples of the world. May 8th, 1945, the day of victory in Europe and scenes of thankful rejoicing in the heart of the Empire's capital, which have been echoed throughout the world.
While the nation celebrated, the British Empire was declining, but Jack Hayward didn't see it that way. He couldn't wait to get abroad again to start his own empire building. He finally chose what seemed then an unpromising place to develop, the island of Grand Bahama in the Caribbean.
Crossing now was complete swamp when I first came here, and we dredged it out and threw up the spoil, the fill, to make good building land. And it's now a golf course and a yacht haven and waterfront lots on canals, but it was all pure swamp. Well, Grand Bahama was almost unheard of, except for the West End Club, which had gone bust. It was a Butlin enterprise which started far too soon, but it was brought to our attention when my father came out to visit myself and the family in 1955 that Grand Bahama was starting up with a charter that guaranteed its tax freedoms and also freedoms from customs duties. So we took an interest in it as a family. No businessman in their right mind would have gone in. It was completely mad. But it was a sense of empire building, the excitement of what might happen, what might become. It was very dicey, very tricky at times. We ran out of the first man's money, Mr. Wallace Groves. We ran out of the Hayward money, and then we searched around for another partner and got some more money from him. And we staggered along from sort of month to month. D.K. Ludwig, the shipping millionaire, put some money in, dredged the harbour, and we survived. But it was complete gamble.
But if it was mad, why did you do it?
Because I am mad.
The mainstay of the Hayward business on the island is the Deepwater Port Authority.
You could phone the girl.
Quite intentionally, there's still a colonial feel about Grand Bahama. It's been completely transformed under Sir Jack's stewardship.
It's in Freddie Laker's letter. We've put in roads, we've put in facilities, hotels, we've put in the third biggest refinery in the world. We've put in restaurants, golf courses, marinas. We've put in casinos, an international airport, a deepwater harbour that takes the largest cruise ships in the world. It's quite a civilized place now. I suppose you're talking of a couple of $1 billion, I should think, has been put into the place.
When he first arrived here, Sir Jack lived in what was little more than a shack. Things are better now, but considering the size of his fortune, his lifestyle is comparatively modest. In recent years, Lady Hayward has chosen to live not here, but at home in Britain. Sir Jack, by contrast, is legally resident in Grand Bahama.
Come on, dogs. Come on, come on, come on then. Come on, come on, come on. No, come on, come on, come on, come on.
Although Sir Jack's in Britain for only a few sporadic days each year, he's a zealot about his nationality.
I think we're the greatest nation the world's ever seen. I can't imagine what it'd been like to have been born French or German or Italian. I mean, I've often said I think I'd have committed suicide once I realised that I had been born French, Italian or German or anywhere else. So I'm very grateful, really, that I was born in Great Britain. I had a super life. I've been treated very nicely. Had lots of opportunities. We've had the empire in which I've been brought up in, virtually. I've spent 50 years in the empire since I first went overseas for training. They're a combination of tilapia and Indian carp. My favourite poet is Kipling, Rudyard Kipling, and he once coined the famous line, "What do they know of England who only England know?"
In front of us we have some truffles. For example, the Prunelle de Bourgogne is the liqueur now called in France.
What Sir Jack knows of England these days is largely from the BBC World Service, which he insists on calling the Empire Service, another of his little eccentricities.
6 o'clock you get world news and then news about Britain, and then 7 o'clock you get news desk and you get pretty well everything. So by 7:30 I've known what's happening in the world, what's happening in Great Britain and what's happening in the sport.
Whatever the temperature, tea is taken at the same time every day.
4 o'clock is the time to take tea. All over the empire people take tea, and one must keep the tradition, otherwise one's body functions and one's mental attitude is thrown out completely if you did it any other time.
I say, don't be so eccentric, He said, who, me eccentric? And he said, in what way am I eccentric? And I said, well, it's a little eccentric to have 15 dogs in your bedroom at night, stray ones. And I said, and a tame bull and a tame cow. I said, you don't expect to find them around the house.
But there's Jack. I mean, Jack in his trucker boots and his bush jacket and his Land Rover with no air conditioning. That's Jack. And that's Freeport.
Among Sir Jack's other quirks are his refusal to take taxis in London and his insistence on having only one pair of shoes.
Be there Friday 11th.
Quite seriously, it doesn't make sense, does it, to have one pair of shoes?
Well, it does, because they're bloody comfortable, and I don't like wearing any others. Actually, I have got a pair of black shoes for evening, and I find them so damned uncomfortable. I just want to slip them off under the table of some function or other that I have to go to. And these desert boots have lasted me for a long time, and they're the most comfortable. I think the Chancellor of the Exchequer, isn't he a desert boot man?
He hasn't bought a pair of shoes for 30 years. But virtually everything he has, he gives away to good causes, charities, Wolverhampton. He's one of the kindest men I've ever known.
Over the years, Sir Jack has parted with millions of pounds to dozens of causes, but before he takes out his chequebook, he wants an assurance that the cause is for Britain. For example, 25 years ago, the island of Lundy in the Bristol Channel came up for sale. Sir Jack thought it ought to belong to the nation and bought it outright.
It was in danger from the Scientologists. Pirate radio stations were looking at it, and generally it was in danger of being taken away from the British people. And so I stepped in, bought it, and we gave it to the National Trust.
For over 30 years, the hulk of one of the world's first all-iron ships lay rotting where she'd been scuttled just off the Falkland Islands. She'd been built over 100 years before by Isambard Brunel. Sir Jack was asked for money to save her. He agreed at once when he heard her name.
A great name, Great Britain. It appealed to me that she was breaking her back in the Falkland Islands, having served the country well, and I got involved and helped pay for it coming back. In fact, I did pay for it coming back to Bristol.
In all, how much did it cost you, do you think?
Well, that was only £150,000, which was considered a lot of money in those days, 1968, came back in 1970, and it was £150,000. In fact, a lot of things I did at that stage seemed to be £150,000.
His next vessel had the same name and cost him a lot more than £150,000. J. Blythe, the round-the-world yachtsman, was looking for support for his yacht, Great Britain.
I was trying to get sponsorship for a yacht to enter in the first Whitbread round the world yacht race, and at that time I was dealing with a very big company, and he said to me, which I thought was quite extraordinary, if the sponsorship falls through, let me know. And I never really thought no more about that. In fact, the sponsorship did fall through, and a friend of mine said, well, why don't you get in touch with Jack? And I couldn't understand how a private individual could sponsor a yacht with so much expense involved. And anyway, to cut a long story short, we sent him a proposal, and after about 3 days of him receiving the proposal, he phoned me up and he said, right, that's it, we're going to go ahead. And I said, what do you mean, go ahead? And he said, well, that's it, we're going to sponsor the boat, go for it. I said, well, we're talking about a lot of money here, do you not want a contract? And I was having difficulty with this private individual bit. And he said, well, I've never had a contract before with anyone, but if you want one, you can have one, but I haven't so far. And you know, he sponsored me for 3 yachts, Jack Hayward, and not once did we have a piece of paper between us. Really quite a remarkable chap.
So when you say a lot of money, what sort of figure are we talking about?
Well, in today's terms, you're looking at something like about, I don't know, maybe £1.5 million or something. In today's money. That's a lot of money to me.
For the 3 boats?
No, it's only for 1 yacht.
Women's cricket in England was on its uppers 25 years ago when Captain Rachel Hayhoe, as she was then, was trying to take a team on tour in Jamaica. Why not, it was suggested, approach Sir Jack?
I actually got a phone call from Jack Hayward from the Bahamas. I thought it was somebody pulling my leg from the Express and Star, you know, pretending that I'd succeed. And Jack Hayward saying, I've got your letter, I'd like to help you. Meet me in London next week, I'll give you the money.
And how much did he give you?
It was something like £1,700, which in 1970 was a lot of money, and that covered all the airfares of the girls to go on this tour to Jamaica.
I'd recently returned from captivity in Beirut, and my wife and I had received an invitation to go to the Falklands. I didn't know anything about Jack, you see. I didn't know anything about his circumstances. And then as I went around, people said, you know, this money came from Jack Hayward for this place. We owe this place to Jack. And I thought, well, he must be a man of some substance, because he'd certainly very quietly put an awful lot of his capital into the islands.
Jack has sunk at least £1 million into the Falklands since the end of the conflict there. Most of the money went on rebuilding the island's hospital after it had been gutted by fire. It was this gift, more than any other, that brought him his knighthood. As plain Jack Hayward, the boss of a company town, he wasn't always popular with the government of the Bahamas. But now, as Sir Jack and a change of government, he's part of the local establishment.
Prime Minister, and I've said this before, sir, and I'll say it again, it gives me a tremendous thrill to say Prime Minister and turn and look at you.
If I can ask you to look in the lens of the camera for 2 feet. Lens of the camera with a nice smile, and here we go. Thank you very kindly.
The Port Authority is not a very popular thing in Grand Bahama. And I suppose that is natural, because the port is like a government. They are in charge, so they're the easiest persons for people to blame for anything. So Jack and the Port Authority are distinguishable in people's mind. People are able to distinguish, so Jack is all right, the Port Authority maybe not.
Have you always been on good terms, though, with the local politicians, or have there been...
No, very bad terms. Until recently, there was a change of government. We had the same government for 25 years, and I wasn't very popular. Luckily, my partner was, so we hedged our bets, and he was popular with the last government, I was popular with the opposition, and thankfully the opposition got in on August 19th, 1992. So I am now popular and my partner's unpopular.
From his office in the Port Authority, Sir Jack phones home every day to keep track of his £20 million investment in Wolverhampton Wanderers.
Rightio, and Steve Ball's improving every day, is he, from his ankle injury? Yep. Anyway, all looks good.
Yep, yes it does.
We've hit the winning combination, and Nottingham Forest will be the test on Sunday. It'll be a big game. I think it'll be a full house.
Yep.
Okay, boy.
Okay, Dad.
Okay, sorry to interrupt the 10 o'clock news.
Right, I'll hear from you later.
Okay, boy. Right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
That will be a lovely sight for a 2,000-seater stand, and that away visitors, they can be there.
Well, we have very expensive telephone calls after a game, so at least it keeps me occupied for about an hour. It doesn't do my phone bill a lot of good.
And that'll be 30,000.
I try to fill him in when he's missed a match, and I try and run through the game. It's easy when we've won. It's a little more difficult when we've lost, explaining what's gone wrong. But on a day-to-day basis, he really leaves it up to me. And other than the major checks that have to be signed every now and again, I'm really in charge, but with him giving us a brief in the background.
The first big cheque paid out at Wolverhampton was when Sir Jack bought the club for just over £2 million.
No, it's really looking great.
Since then, it's cost a further £16 million to rebuild the club.
Jonathan will inherit it, obviously, and he's got to make a go of it. Sell and buy players astutely.
I would like to invite Sir Jack to say a few words, and also to present him with an honorary membership for the club. And just so he has no excuse not to make use of it, we've also got a tracksuit to present him. And that is your honorary membership.
Thank you very much.
It's only cost you £15 million. But
cheap at the price.
Although he loves Britain and being the local hero, Sir Jack, for tax reasons, has to ration the number of days he spends here each year.
But I'm bound to ask you, if you think it's so great, why don't you live here?
Well, that's a good question. Of course, people, I hate this tax exile. I'm not a tax exile because when I went to the Bahamas, I wasn't making enough money to pay any tax. I like to call myself an empire builder. It just so happens that the place where I parked the family and have since taken investment, we don't have taxation, thank God.
There are, said Benjamin Franklin, only two certainties, death and taxes. Sir Jack may have avoided one, but what about the other?
I think I want to be incinerated, but where will the ashes be? I don't know. I did leave instructions once that a small plane should take them over the Great Britain of Bristol and then over Lundy. It's almost in line of sight. But I think I'd like a few dropped on Molyneux Pitch, a few of the ashes.